to start with this. I appreciate the media coming out today to talk about the bill I just dropped this morning. When I dropped it in, the lady in the front said, "What is this?" I said, "This is a bill that's going to change your life forever." And so the bill number is LR 300CA, Constitutional Amendment. The bill will remove all property tax, income tax, corporate and individual, inheritance tax, and personal property tax. We in the state of Nebraska have been talking about tax reform for over 50 years. Today, what we're about to embark on is we're going to change the way Nebraskans are taxed. And this is going to change your life and your children and your grandchildren's lives forever. Because we will be the only state at this point that has a consumption tax. So let me begin by saying the difference and describing the difference between what a consumption tax is and a sales tax. A sales tax is collected every time something sells, and a consumption tax is collected on services and goods that are bought by the first consumer. We have discovered that in the state of Nebraska, we collect about $9.5 billion in all forms of taxes. That includes sales tax, income tax, and property tax. The consumption tax bill is put in place today to collect that much money for replacing all of those taxes. The bill will be implemented and there'll be a prebate back to those individuals who are paying taxes on their consumptions that are below the poverty level. Everybody in the state will receive that. So when they have received their prebate, the average Nebraska citizen who spends $64,000, their consumption tax rate will be 5.23%. The prebate has already been figured into the consumption of the consumption tax that has been collected on the total amount. So going forward, we will be able to fund all of the things that we do now with a flat tax, a consumption tax that removes all of those burdensome regressive taxes that we currently pay. So some of the things that I'd like to share with you about the taxes that we currently pay. What do they do to us? It retards economic growth and reduces the standard of living. It impedes competitiveness for individuals and industry. It reduces savings and investments. It impedes unacceptable and unnecessary administrative and compliance costs with individuals that have to file these taxes. Sales tax, there are too many exemptions for sales tax. The LR 300CA Constitutional Amendment removes all exemptions, no exemptions. Every goods, all new goods, and all services will be taxed. It's an opportunity for us to lower taxes for everybody, and those less fortunate in our communities, the lower income people, will be held completely harmless on this bill because they'll be paying consumption tax on their food, and they'll receive a prebate back, so it costs them absolutely nothing. So what does a consumption tax do? Why should we do this? It's a more simple and fair way to tax people. It will promote savings and investments. It will promote fairness. It will promote economic growth like none other. It will raise the standard of living for all. It will increase investments in many ways. It will enhance productivity and competitiveness. It will reduce administrative expenses, and I'll talk about that in a moment. It'll improve and move upward in our society the social standing of all. We will exempt, as I said earlier, the poor from tax. So let's talk a bit about what does the consumption tax eliminate. First and foremost, it eliminates any need for any tax incentives. When you are the state that has zero income tax, zero property tax, and you're another state trying to compete with that, how many incentives can you get to compete with zero? None. We'll become number one place to do business. And I spoke with the governor, I said, you better get another table for the governor's cups. We will be the most sought after state to live in. Retired people will want to live here. Young people will want to stay here. We will remove the opportunity or the need for the property assessment division, the people in the state to collect income tax. PERT, and any other form of agency that handles valuations. It will streamline government and make it more efficient if that's possible. But it is a fair way to tax people. You choose then what taxes you pay. And so here today with me is also Paul Van Buren is here today. He's with the True Nebraskans that have been driving the petition, running the petition. And Paul is going to speak about what does this do to the petition. And Senator McDonald would like to address you today and speak to you about an idea that he has on how we implement the tax. And when Senator McDonald has finished his comments and Paul Van Buren has finished his, we will open it up for questions. Thank you. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Thanks for being here today. This is a first step of a 1,000 steps. We want to make sure the people of Nebraska know that we are listening to them. This idea is based on a study. The idea of this study comes from the people of Nebraska. Now, what we're trying to do is have a discussion that will change this state for the future. In this process, there's going to be a number of questions. Senator Erdman's ready to address some of them. But also, today's day 10. That's why we're here. We had to get this legislation, this constitutional amendment out today. That's part of the rules. We had over 400 bills introduced today. We had 739 left from last session. The senators are working extremely hard, and there's a number of issues to discuss, things for us to work on. Sometimes we run out of time. We've got 50 days left. Are we going to be having the discussion of a possible special session? We are. We don't want to go home without doing the people's work and making sure that people know that we're doing everything possible, looking at all ideas, all studies that are being brought to us and taking them seriously. Now again, we have 50 more days, a number of issues that are going to be coming up, but at the same time, we're going to be having that discussion amongst the senators, with others, with the governor. Should we be talking about having a special session? Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm Paul Van Buren. I'm the Executive Director of True Nebraskans. We are the group behind the property tax petition that's been circulated. There's obviously a lot to discuss, but the short summary of it all is that as we started this petition drive, it was not to reduce property taxes, because the petition does not do that. What the petition does do is force a discussion in the unicameral as to how to make our Nebraska's taxation system more equitable, fair, to remove the disproportionate burden that we have placed on our young people, our elderly, some of the poorest people in Nebraska. And the whole purpose of the petition is to drive that discussion, however the unicameral chooses to solve it. During the course of this discussion, with the help of Senator McDonald, the Nebraska Fair Tax Group, Senator Erdman, and others, we have came across the idea for a simple consumption tax. It's an interesting idea. It's a novel idea. And right now, first and foremost, we intend to continue the petition drive and carry it on to completion, because that is a recognition that nothing will happen. It's human nature. We have a 53-year-old taxation system that has not been fundamentally reformed, and if nothing else, it will form that discussion. However, this constitutional amendment also presents an option that takes us farther, faster, and it does it in a way that suddenly eliminates the disproportionate tax burden that is literally driving Nebraskans from Nebraska, that is scrapping Nebraska's business, that gives us the highest corporate taxes of any state around us. And for that reason, we are enthusiastic about the petition. So we will continue, but we are very grateful to Senator Erdman, Senator McDonald, people of the Fair Tax Group for bringing this forward, because this is a very viable solution, and we would have no problem supporting it fully and enthusiastically. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll take some questions, but you've all heard the saying, we should think outside the box, right? Well, I would say that this is thinking outside the box on steroids. And Senator Holler and I were talking one day, and he said, you know, if we do this, and we remove these exemptions, these barriers, people will want to move here. He said, we're going to need to build a wall around the state to keep them out. And I said, yes, and Colorado will pay for it. But the point is, without a doubt, this is a revolutionary change in the state of Nebraska to put us first and foremost on people's minds of where do you want to live. And so if you have any questions, we'll try to answer those. Our goal is to talk about the concept. Our goal is to talk about what does this mean to us? What does that mean to you individually? And so there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, and I think Senator McDonald and his comment about a special session are correct. One of the things I was disappointed in that Senator McDonald picked up a copy from the clerk on when the bill was introduced, and it didn't show who the co-signers were. And there are 11 co-signers plus myself. And I appreciate these gentlemen standing here today. We have many committee hearings and things, or there are others would have been here. But we have 10 other co-signers plus we have myself. There's 11 of us on the bill. The people that I've spoken with, Senator Dorn is here in the back, he understands the concept. He's willing to talk about it. I shared this information with Senator Linehan. I wanted her to know that we're not trying to sidestep what they're doing. So I informed her. She said it's a discussion we need to have. So before you ask me the question, I'm going to answer it. Have you talked to the governor? The answer is yes. We met with the governor. The governor said the same thing. This is a conversation worth having. And so we're here today to talk about that with you. So if you have any questions, please ask me.
Would you define consumption?
Would I define consumption? Consumption means anything that is consumed the first time. You buy a new car, you pay consumption tax. You buy a used car, no consumption tax. The first owner pays the consumption tax. There's no such thing as used services. So anytime you use a service, lawyer fees, real estate commissions, any of those kind of things will be taxed. There's no exceptions. And so consumption means things that are consumed. Sales tax will be applied to everything that sells. That's the difference.
Would businesses pay on their purchases if they're not the final consumer?
No, sir. There are the business-to-business transactions are exempt. For example, Kawasaki buys a load of steel to build rail cars, no tax. A farmer buys a combine, no tax. A farmer buys seed and chemicals for his farm, no tax. The person who buys the rail car that Kawasaki made pays the tax. They're the consumer. The first consumer pays the tax. The second consumer doesn't because the first one's already paid it. That's the difference between a sales tax and a consumption tax. But as I said earlier, because of the prebate, all individuals will receive a prebate, and the low-income individuals, a family of 4, up to $32,480, according to the information we got from Beacon Hill that did the study, will have 0 tax. And as I said, a family of 4 that spends $64,000, their tax percentage will be 5.23. It's an opportunity for us to gain investment and create wealth like never before. Martha, do you have a question?
Yes, tell me how this prebate works, because it sounds like you're going to have to have some sort of mechanism to determine a family's income, and
There will be no method to determine income. What we will have is we will have to have a mechanism to figure out who lives in the state, how many people are here, how many people in your household, and then you will receive a prebate check based on the number of people in here. Has nothing to do with income. We're not going to collect income tax, so there's going to be no way we can prove how much income you have. It will be based on the individual who lives here. Alabama is doing this as well. There's 9 other states considering this. Alabama's a little ahead of us. They have already introduced their constitutional amendment. They have already implemented or drawn up how they distribute the funds and how they're going to do that. So I have read through their information. I understand how they're going to keep track of the people and how they're going to distribute the funds. So we may not have to reinvent that. We can follow what Alabama did, and we can apply that here. So it's not based on income, it's based on if you live here or not.
Would food be included?
Food is included? Yes, it is. And as I said, we're going to try to hold those people who are low income completely harmless. And as I said with the example, a family of 4 of $32,400 will pay no consumption tax.
And what about interstate commerce? You know, how would that work? I mean, you know, sales tax, you can't charge sales tax, you know, unless they buy it in state. You know, what about online? How would all that work?
Well, it would work, the online sales, if you buy things outside the state of Nebraska today because of the Wayfair tax we put in place, they pay sales tax, they would pay the consumption tax on those online sales. Because if we didn't do that, this wouldn't work. We have to be able to collect that consumption tax.
And so people, and then people who live outside the state, you know, and when they come in and they purchase things, they have to pay if they bought them inside the state.
If they bought inside the state, they have to pay, yes. Yeah. It's just like if you go to another state, anything you buy there that they have sales tax on, it's the same as here. You buy a new good here, if you're an out-of-stater, you pay consumption tax.
So would this include taxing medical services, prescription drugs,
Yes.
etc.?
Yeah.
So when I have to go buy my insulin for $200 or whatever, I'd be paying this tax on that.
Yeah, that's correct. All services are going to be taxed. All goods and services. No exceptions.
And Senator, Senator Breezy had kind of a similar bill to put everybody back into the pool.
Yeah.
You know, and that didn't go very far. Yours kind of, you know, not only puts everybody in the pool, but I mean, it puts the whole kit caboodle in the pool. But how do you expect this to get any leverage when, you know, the Breezy bill didn't get very much leverage?
I think the difference between Breezy's bill and this is a total reconstruction of our tax system. And that's totally the difference. The difference between his bill wasn't reconstructing the whole tax system. This is fixing the whole issue, everything. This is eliminating all those taxes and replacing with a fair tax. There's no better way, no fairer way to do it than this.
And how high would the consumption tax be, you know, to replace all those taxes and hold harmless government?
That's a good question. Well, what we've discovered in Nebraska is they're making an assumption based on the information they took off the Department of Revenue, and they've figured the consumption in Nebraska is somewhere around $107 billion total. And so if you did the numbers, and at the number we need to collect is $9.5 billion. So if you do a 10.6, and that's what they're figuring, the rate would be is 10.6 preliminary. We haven't nailed that completely. But 10.6 times 107 billion would collect $11.4 billion. And as I told you, we're going to give back a prebate. That prebate would be equal to almost $1,000 per person. So we have 1.9 million people in the state. 1.9 million times $1,000 is 1.9 billion. So you take the 11.4, subtract the 1.9, you have 9.5. So when I said the prebate is already figured into the consumption tax collected, that's how it works. And so that's how it would be. So the tax would already be, the prebate would already be figured in the tax collected.
And you're a local control guy. Can you just kind of take away a lot of local control?
No, they'll still be able to make their budgets like they always have. Let me say it like this. So some say, how are you going to do this because you need to have local control? How are they going to get their funding? Well, let me ask you, how do we fund the University of Nebraska? They send an appropriation. They do a budget. They send it to us and we appropriate the money. So all of those are in the weeds questions that we need to work out. And as Senator McDonald alluded to, that's why we have a special session. We've got to figure out all those questions and answer all those, because those are questions above and beyond what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is a concept. Do you agree with the concept? Doesn't make sense. And I would say that every senator that I've spoken with, and I've probably talked to 20 or more, they agree with the concept. And they want to have a conversation about how we do this and answer those kind of questions. So that's why it takes more in-depth conversation. That's why we'll have this special session to do that.
So this would point is to eliminate local taxes as well, so, local
Define
sales
local taxes.
taxes.
What do you mean by local taxes?
Well, you're already talking about property taxes, but local sales taxes, local occupation taxes.
We're not gonna mess with local sales tax. Those local units of government that have occupation tax in place and sales tax in place, that'll be their job to do that. We're not gonna mess with those.
But they would lose the ability for property taxes, to raise property taxes.
Yes, sir.
So counties would have to come to the state and say, we need money for, you know, roads and bridges and.
Correct.
And
Yep,
our
that's right.
jail and so forth.
That's right.
So the state would be controlling that.
The state would approve their budget, yes.
Didn't that worry you though? I mean,
Isn't that what?
doesn't that worry you as a rural senator that, you know, if the state has to approve, lawmakers have to approve local budgets, that, you know, a rural lawmaker might be on the short end of the stick on some of the county improvements?
Well, maybe I should be a little concerned about the fact that most of my schools don't get any state aid. I mean, tell me what the difference is. We don't get any now. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about putting something in place that makes sense for everyone. And we have urban senators who are very much in support of this. Senator Wayne's on here, Senator McDonald, several others. We understand that we're all Nebraskans and we all need to make a decision that affects everyone the same. And so we'll figure it out. But what we've done for years is we continue to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. And we continue to do over and over the same things. And the next year, when we get the same results, we go, I can't believe it. Nothing changed. So this is an opportunity for us to make that change, to actually step out and become leaders. We are the only state with a unicameral, you know. Why wouldn't we want to be the only state with a consumption tax? How many will follow us? What happens to Iowa, Kansas, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado? We go to consumption tax. And they're trying to compete with us. They're going to wish we had a wall.
What happens to the retailer who, in Omaha, who's trying to compete with the retailer in Council Bluffs, and here you've got this 10-point-whatever% tax across the river.
Yeah.
It's a much smaller
That's bad,
sales
right?
tax.
That's not a problem. Here's the problem. You're making an assumption. You're making an assumption that we're going to continue to sell those things for the same price. You go down, let me give you this example. You go down to the store to buy a can of beans. On the shelf, the beans says $1. Inside that $1 on that can of beans are all the hidden taxes that you don't see. What are those? They're personal property tax the store owner pays. They're the income tax the store owner pays. They're the property tax the store owner pays. So he puts that in the price of the beans. It's in there, right? And so now, if we remove all those taxes from the price of the can of beans, what can he charge for that can of beans and still make the same money he did before? So whether the difference is 4% between Kansas and Nebraska, 3.5, they're going to raise theirs to 7. So the local merchant in Nebraska lowers his price 4. And the person says, I can drive over to Iowa and buy this for the same price. Why would I do that? And those retail people are smart. Now they'll understand those hidden taxes that are in these products goes away, I can sell these products cheaper. That's an easy answer. And those consumers will understand, hey, even though it's 10.6, if I go to Iowa, I pay more for it, but it's less sales tax. Same thing. I'm not thinking that that's going to be a problem for us.
Will this apply to gasoline?
No, what we're going to try to do on gasoline, we talked about that. The situation that I think about with gasoline and the consumption tax is if you buy a load of fuel and you're the station owner and you put it in your tank for $2 and you have consumption tax on $2 gas, and then the next load's $2.20 and you have consumption tax on $2.20, what are you pumping out of the tank, $2 or $2.20? So we need to talk about how we put that excise tax or keep that in place on the gas. I think that's an important discussion we have. Yes, sir?
Nebraska region has been noticed at the highest corporate income tax rate in the area. Does that include, I don't mean just nominally,
His question was about corporate income tax being one of the highest in the nation. We have a high corporate income tax rate. We have a high tax rate on everything. Several years ago, the state.
In real terms, I mean, not just nominal.
Right.
And including incentives.
Including what?
Incentives given to the industry, so it's still with all that.
Yeah, the incentives given out each year, like last year when we did the review on the incentives, the state gave away $200 million in tax incentives to businesses that come here. So what would happen if that goes away is everybody get a play on the same level playing field. So here's what happens with incentives. Some call it prioritizing, right? We're putting these incentives in place for certain businesses. I call it government picking winners and losers. That's what it is. But the political term is, you know, that's what they call it, prioritizing. And so this eliminates all that, and it makes us even with everybody in the nation, because nobody can compete with zero. But the corporate income tax goes away. We're going to eliminate corporate income tax, individual income tax. All of that's going to be eliminated. So
I don't understand the discussion of a special session. I mean, you're in this session, you've introduced something. What is the scenario that involves a special session?
As we started off by saying, this is the first step of 1,000 steps. The idea of having this kind of discussion and making this kind of change, it's a matter of time. We have 50 days left in this session. As I mentioned, we had over 400 bills introduced in the first 10 days. We still have legislation from last year that we're working on. We're coming down to time and to be able to get laser focused on possibly a special session based on the idea of the hill that's in front of us that we're going to need to climb to make this kind of change. And all the questions you're asking today is what we need to hear. Again, this is based on a study. Talking to our fellow senators who are working very hard on a number of issues. They're extremely busy. Trying to get everyone together and have discussions and look at this study hasn't been easy. So the idea of having the option and the potential for a special session, we're going to be discussing that with our fellow senators, and we know we need 2/3 to do that, and possibly have those discussions as Senator Erdman with the governor, and we're going to look at all options. But again, this is a major task. We want to make sure the people of Nebraska know that we're listening, that we are looking at all ideas. And again, this study came to us, and we're taking it very, very seriously.
Why not do it next year?
With the proposal out of the revenue committee.
As Senator Erdman said earlier, we're not saying that we're not looking at the revenue committee's potential, their recommendation, and all the hard work that Senator Linehan has done. But at the same time, we're looking at a major change, and this is something that we think, based on the work we've done so far and the research and the discussions we've had, deserves that kind of time and effort to make sure that this is vetted and that we know that these are the pros and the cons. But to say that we're not supportive as individuals of some of the things that are being brought forward this session, we're not saying that.
okay. Well, we got things to do. I would appreciate you coming. If you have other questions, we can talk about it later. But thanks for coming today. I appreciate Senator McDonald and Senator Holleran and all of those, Senator Merman, and they've been working on the petition drive and those things. And I appreciate that, and all the guys, all the senators that signed on. I do appreciate that as well. And thank you for coming today. Thank you.